of the European Union to undertake operations of peacekeeping in the world under the mandate of the United Nations.
I find that very odd. You cannot defend yourself, but you want to go and defend others. There's something very odd about your thinking process.
It's true. I mean, it's true that it might look at first sight, because it's not a traditional sequence. In the reality of the state, is first the defense of the territory comes first. Then you think about what you are going to do in the international arena and whether you are going to contribute or not to the peace efforts in the international world. But we are, as I said before, an animal of its own. We are one in this of this species, and as we understand that our defense, the defense of our territory, is already fulfilled, either because member states do ensure their own defense of their territories, or because we do it within the NATO alliance, then when we think about the outreach of the European Union, we think more in terms of contributing to world peace and stability, and to create a capacity to help the UN in that regard.
Over to Roger Williams for 2 questions from there.
Hi, good morning. My name is David Eichhorn. I'm a junior at Roger Williams University. And I was just wondering, with a common currency, constitution, and open borders, how can a country keep its sovereignty in the European Union?
Second question.
Yeah. What is the definition of sovereignty in Europe? Go ahead, second question.
Good morning. My name is Robin Preventure, and I am a junior at Roger Williams University. And before you were talking about the criteria that is necessary to become a member of the EU, and I was wondering if you could briefly describe that.
Okay, sovereignty and criteria. Go ahead.
Okay, well, sovereignty, you're right. To be a member of the European Union, you have to accept that you are going to surrender part of your sovereignty. So you will no longer be sovereign in a number of areas. That's precisely the whole basis of the construction of the European integration process. That was the principle in which the European Steel and Coal organization community was created, that Ambassador Kamal was referring at the very beginning, because precisely by surrendering that sovereignty, you lose the control over it, and you lose the opportunity to use it only on national terms. You have to use it on European terms. So we have 3 basic big areas of activity. One, which is that in which member states have surrendered completely their sovereignty. They are not sovereign at all in those areas. For instance, international trade. Everything regarding international trade is done at European level. Member states do not have any competence. There are other areas in which we share responsibility, and some competence is at European level, some other has stayed in the member states. To take just one example, could be environment or employment policies. There are certain things that are decided at European level, others that are decided at national country level, sometimes even below a state level, because sometimes are regional authorities the ones that are competent for those issues. And then, of course, there are issues in which member states have not surrendered any competence or any sovereignty. That's, for instance, to put it bluntly, the case of peace and war. Member states have not surrendered any sovereignty to the EU in terms of, say, a decision like going to war or making peace. And that continues to be fundamentally and exclusively a national competence. When they have surrendered their sovereignty, like, for instance, I was saying in the case of trade, or it's also the case in fisheries in some other areas, then they have given without even the possibility to take initiatives. Only the European Commission can take the initiatives. Then member states approve it or disapprove it in the Council, but it's only the Commission the one entitled to put forward initiatives in order to make decisions. So that's the nature of the European Union. It's a supranational nature to a large extent, although there are areas where still we work on intergovernmental basis. Is, for instance, we were talking before about the European security and defense policy. That's completely 100% intergovernmental. There is no supranationality there. There is no sovereignty surrender. Now, the other question... Criteria. There are two sets of criteria, but one is more important than another. Because the first set I'm going to refer to would be the economic and technical criteria. But this is one that you can relatively easily overcome. In fact, when you are a candidate, you are already in such tight cooperation with the European Union, and you are receiving such big flow of aid, financial aid, and of course technical aid, that it's a matter of time that you will reach those conditions, that your economy would be, so to say, strong enough to undergo the big shock that implies to get from one day to another inside an internal market, which is the most important and strong internal market in the world. So I will not refer too much to those criteria. The other criteria, which are more sensitive and are the ones that are politically more important, are the political criteria. I did a set of criteria that were prerequisites, sine qua non, for a country to enter the EU. To make them one is purely and simply, you have to be an authentic, real democracy, where human rights are respected, where there is freedom of speech, freedom of association, political freedom, social freedom, labor freedom, and where you have structures that function democratically. You have a parliament, you have an executive power, you have elections, etc. So those are the political criteria that was set in Copenhagen, and now the ones that any country before entering the EU has to comply with fully.
Over to West Michigan for two questions from there.
Good morning, ambassadors. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. In May and June of this year, the Constitution initiative was essentially stopped short. All hopes were extinguished. What is the next step right now? Do we have a time frame for current projects or new projects? What can we talk about now, etc.?
Very good. Constitution. Second question.
I'm Nenad Senic, grad student from WMU, otherwise coming from Slovenia, which makes me a European Union citizen.
Louder, please.
Okay. I'm Nenad Senic. I'm a grad student, otherwise I'm coming from Slovenia, which makes me a EU citizen. So, hello. My question is that European Commissioner Olli Rehn was in Belgrade this week, where he signed a pre-accession negotiations treaty with Serbia and Montenegro, which means that negotiations with Serbia and Montenegro to become a candidate state supposed to start. My question is whether this wasn't more a symbolic act from the part of the European Union or European Commission, because as we know, the future of the country is still so uncertain. It's possible that Montenegro will go forward with the independence referendum next year, so it's possible that in the end the European Union have to negotiate with three separate countries, Kosovo, Serbia and Montenegro. So my question is how the European Union plans to approach this issue and whether this actually represents a problem to European Commission.
Yeah, the Balkans. Balkanized, unknown, too mixed up, moving very fast in 10 or 15 years from a single country to break up countries. How do you deal with that type of a situation in Europe itself?
A complicated one, but let me perhaps take first the question about the Constitution. Unfortunately, there is not much that can be said